Hello, human peoples. You're listening to the podcast network of Gamefully Unemployed. Support us and gain access to great exclusive podcasts like Fox Mulder is a Maniac, Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, Star Trek The Next Futurama, and our latest show, Spiel Boys. Head over to patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. We do game streaming, movie nights with our patrons every Friday night, and you can even commission your own podcast about anything you want. Literally anything, within reason, and we have to do it. You are quite frankly out of excuses not to go visit patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. That's patreon.com/GAMEFULLY unemployed, which is spelled like it sounds.
I was watching this one. Got very itchy. My goodness.
This movie's really funny in a lot of places.
Okay, I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something about Michael Shannon stabbing a guy and going, machine! Machine!
Machine!
Very
Machine!
funny.
Now look, I'll tear him up when you see!
Hi, everybody.
Hello, everyone.
My name is David Bell,
My name is Tom Ryman.
and we just watched Bug, otherwise known as Two Bad Neighbors. Terrible
They're
neighbors.
aphids.
They are. They're aphids.
There's no bugs on your skin.
You have to dig it out.
I'll dig it out and show you.
This December, from the Academy Award-winning director of The Exorcist,
Open the door.
comes the movie the Chicago Tribune calls one of the most disturbing horror movies imaginable.
We have to kill him.
They want you to know they're there.
Bug.
All right, before we start, big thank you to Burrito.
Thank
They
you.
are the
Thank
ones.
you so much.
Yeah, they had us watch Bug. I guess this is good timing. William Friedkin, we just lost him
Yeah.
fairly
sucks.
recently. Yeah, this was, he directed it from the
This
director
is-
of The Exorcist.
This is a movie that I forgot was William Friedkin.
Yeah, this is a movie that I saw when it first came out, which was like 2006, I want to
Same.
say.
Yeah, I watched it thoroughly hammered, rented from, I think, Redbox, so it was pretty fuzzy in my memory.
So I watched it, I think, after working a late night shift. So I watched it in a similar place where I think I had a few drinks. I was really out of it. I still remembered some key moments from it. But, like, for example, I knew Michael Shannon was in this, but I couldn't picture him in it. So, like, I was excited to rewatch this because this movie's stacked. Ashley Judd and Michael Shannon, and then Harry Connick
And then Harry
Jr.
Connick Jr. swoops in. You're like, hold on.
Yeah. And so it was like, okay, I was so excited to watch this just based on that. And this is definitely an actor's movie, right?
Oh, yeah. It's based on a play.
I was going to say, it's a play,
Which,
you can tell.
Watching the movie, you're like, yeah, I had that thought partway through before I went and looked into it. Because I remember the movie when it came out, and because it had a little bit of buzz for being like, this is a good indie film. And I didn't remember.
And it's The Exorcist
right?
director,
It must have been pushed as being from the director of The Exorcist, but I didn't remember that about the movie.
Oh, yeah, the trailer says it. And
Yeah.
the poster says it. It
Yeah.
says Bug. Yeah, and I remember, so there I was looking into this, and I remember at the time there was a bit of disappointment about this film. It's an actor's film. I don't think audiences. I think audiences
they
were
really
expecting
sold it as they really sold it as a horror movie.
And I would argue it is a body horror movie, just not the one you think.
It's also psychological. That ending, oof. That last,
my God.
the last shot.
Oh yeah, my fucking God.
Yeah.
It's also, I would argue, a bit ahead of its time. I mean, you could argue it's not, something about conspiracies is never ahead of its time.
No.
But this turned out to be like more relevant as time went on, because it is essentially about what causes a person to believe in a conspiracy, like the trauma and pain that puts someone in a cult, essentially, right? It's about a two-person cult in a way.
It's about a lot of things. Like definitely, that addiction, codependency, and how those feed into each other, and certainly about how shared delusions get passed and built upon, for sure.
Right. So it's a horror movie. I don't think it was the one audiences were expecting.
It definitely wasn't the one it was sold as. Like I remember the trailers made it seem like this was literally a movie about flesh-eating bugs.
Right. Spoilers.
It's not.
Isn't.
It is not.
It's a slow burn as well. The halfway point is when they start getting a little weird about the bugs, but it's a very from a writing perspective.
It's immediately weird.
Oh yeah,
I think the bugs are immediately weird, but yeah.
Well, no, what I mean is, it takes halfway for them to start doing shit about the bugs.
Right? Yeah, that's true.
And then it's definitely immediately weird and ramps up. It is a very, I thought, hard story to write. Because you have to get from this. I love, like, near the end, I was like, remember that conversation they had at the rope swing? It was so sweet. You know, like, you have to get from these two people kind of meeting each other.
You really don't see where it's going.
Yeah, that escalated quickly, the movie, right?
Yeah.
It has to escalate, but it has to do so in a way where you believe it, right? You believe that Ashley Judd specifically would kind of fall into this. Also,
right, 'cause there's a point, and it's one of two times in the movie that they literally have the entire set shakes with like the sound of the helicopters. Yeah. Like that's the moment she buys into his delusion. But like and it's also the moment where they sort of reveal that like, oh, she's cracked too. Like you're sort of from the beginning of the movie to that point, you're sort of, because you're seeing the movie from her point of view, and you're sort of, she seems to be a familiar character. Like she's stuck in this seedy motel working at a honky tonk bar, and her horrible ex just got out of prison, and she's been getting these harassing phone calls that just nobody's on the other end over and over and over again. But as Michael Shannon comes in there and like his craziness kind of starts to start to amp up, you realize that, oh, she was cracked too, and maybe and like there's kind of slowly reveal that she's smoking crack, like literally, I think. Like that's like a reveal at the end. So it's I love how they sort of slowly tease out that maybe the phone calls she was receiving in the beginning were never being sent.
Or
either.
Maybe it was Michael Shannon or something.
Or maybe like I sort of landed on the phone was never ringing. Like that was in her head.
Sure.
Like she was already a person who has delusions, probably because she's just doing drugs and drinking all the time, and then obviously she has a lot of trauma.
As the Joker put it, all she needed was a push.
Yeah,
you know, like that's kind of what it is that you realize slowly that she is extremely broken.
Yeah,
and you feel bad for her because she's sort of in between a rock and a Harry Connick Jr. Like she's trapped. For the record, as far as seedy hotels go, or motels rather, pretty good. They had a kitchen in there.
Yeah.
Like a stove.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean,
and
it's a seedy motel.
And a microscope, apparently.
Yeah, and a microscope.
And a microscope set.
Yeah. So, I guess for people who don't know, I mean, again, based on a play, so it's mostly in a motel. And Ashley Judd is, like we said, she's the first shot really points it out, which is the isolation of it all. Mm-hmm. She's nowhere. The helicopters, by the way, I love that they set this up with the ceiling fan.
Yeah.
That like most of the movie, you're like, is that the ceiling fan? Is that a helicopter? They do a thing with the sound design where it like part of this movie is making you feel the paranoia, right? Like when the doctor shows up, he's so fucking weird.
He's weird.
You're like, is he in on it? Is there a conspiracy? But you don't know whose eyes you're seeing it through.
Right.
So she has one friend in the world. She is
who works with her at the bar.
Yeah, there is some. She goes to the supermarket and like stares at an onion and at the shopping cart, and you know it means something, but you don't know quite what it means yet. But you know it's something, and so she's clearly there's this shitty guy in her life that she's scared of. That I don't think we meet right away. I think we meet Michael Shannon first.
We meet Michael Shannon first. Yes.
Yeah, I assume in the first act, her friend brings him over.
Oh, and her friend is Lynn Collins from John Carter.
Oh, yeah. She sure is, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Yes. He assures her he's not an axe murderer, and he's technically right.
It's the I think it's the
it's not an axe he uses later.
Oh, right. I was about to say I think it's the first line he has, but actually the first thing we hear him say is something like, "Oh, I understand." But like it's so funny to have Michael Shannon's official introduction of the movie be him shuffle out of a bathroom and say, "I'm not an axe murderer," in the middle of
so
two other
good.
people's conversation, and they don't stop and acknowledge what he
They
said.
ignore him, and then he repeats
so he
it.
repeats it. I'm not an axe murderer.
He's immediately like, it's so, it's something I realized about this movie is that it's the I mean, this isn't a new observation, but the fact that romantic comedies and horror movies can start the same.
Yes.
Where it's like, he could be like a quirky guy who just needs to be,
That's how it's presented
fixed.
at
Exactly.
first.
Yeah. And they have kind of a sweet conversation. He
Right,
stays the
he
night.
he comes off as weird but sweet.
Yeah. And I don't think they like hook up at first,
No,
right?
they don't. They do not the first night.
He wants to sleep on the floor, not the couch. So you can tell, like, oh, like, I think we know he's in the army at that point. So you think, like, okay, he's not used to, cushy.
Right. You get the
Beds.
you get the sense that maybe he has some sort of trauma or PTSD. But again, they're presenting him
Yeah.
in a way where it's like he's odd but sweet.
He's a manic pixie dream girl.
Kind
like
of,
that's
yeah.
the thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
He looks at the painting and he says, "There's stuff in it. If you look really hard enough, you'll see about the painting," which of course is foreshadowing to what the movie's about.
Right, because
looking really hard.
when he says it, you buy it. You're like, oh, because you know that. I love what they do with him with respect to that, because the first couple of things he tosses out are based partially in truth.
Yeah, the fucking fire alarm where he's like, "There's a radioactive element in there." There is. He's right. He's like, "It could hurt you," but that's not true.
And then, well, yeah, but how that begins, where it sounds like a bug, and it's chirping, and then he locates it, and he's the one that is like accepts that there's a reasonable explanation for it. It's like, it's the smoke alarm.
Right. Yes. He seems like
He seems
cult,
reasonable. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect cult leader, conspiracy guy.
And I just want to go back to the painting real quick, because that is totally a thing. If you take art, like I took art history, and they teach you all a big part of it is like going and showing you how to like look for like the hidden like figures and meanings in paintings, because that was a thing that they did. They would get money to do a painting for somebody and then like hide their own little bullshit in there. Like, so it's like an actual thing. So I'm thinking, like, when he says it, you just sort of accept it at face value. Like, oh yeah, he's probably right. Maybe there is some hidden stuff in there, but there absolutely isn't. There's not.
Right.
It's just a painting of like a house.
Right. But the movie's sort of drawing us in to him as well.
Right. We're kind of being drawn under his spell.
Exactly. And there's little other things too. She talks about the psychic who told Kennedy, not Kennedy Prime, but the other
Teddy Kennedy.
Yeah, that he was going to get shot. And he's like, and she was right. And then later she has a magic 8-ball and she reads it and they stick on the answer. So you start thinking, like, what does that have to do with anything? Is there premonition in this? And then when you think about it for a second more, you're like, of course someone's told a Kennedy he was going to get shot. Like, that doesn't make them psychic.
Yeah.
Like that, obviously someone's going to say that and then someone will be right. So like, it's starting those things where it's like quirkiness and like little ideas that then when you think about it a little longer, you're like, wait a second.
Right. That's
nothing.
Yeah. There are more seeds on the kind of reveal I was talking about earlier, where it's the kind of the plot twist is like, oh, Ashley Judd was already delusional, kind of.
Yeah. But it all comes off as like everyday people's stuff.
Yeah.
And that's
just kind of
like
two quirky people. Because none of them are unfamiliar like personality. Like, we all know people who do psychic readings or magic 8-balls or can rattle off a lot of weird statistics about history and conspiracies and stuff, and it's not it's like heightened, but it's not like crackpot, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Like ranting about like MK Ultra. It's like, well, that's a real thing, and he talks about MK Ultra. You're like, well, yeah, that is a real thing.
Right. And by the end of this movie, you're not sure, like, did the army do something to him?
Right.
Or
it's
is he
really
just
unclear.
a paranoid schizophrenic? And like, he's clearly having an episode either way.
Right.
So like that's how the movie gets away with it. Essentially, is they're not, he's not having an episode at the beginning,
right,
and then he kind of falls off the deep end. And so and it's a very fast fall off. So like by planting this stuff with Ashley Judd, her trauma, the fact that, like you said, she's smoking crack and clearly having delusions, like it was they had to like perfectly craft two people to do this so quickly, because it happens in a few weeks, right? Because next Harry Connick Jr. shows up and he is just chewing the scenery, just like I'm
really
the abusive.
is.
Yeah, I'm abusive boyfriend. Got it. I'm gonna Harry Connick Jr. the shit out of
it
this.
really does.
I'm gonna be fucking copycat Harry Connick Jr.
I'm gonna be the shiniest
Yeah,
fucking abusive boyfriend.
I am
He's like
Henry Bowers grown up. I am a Stephen King bully.
The first image we see of him, he's glistening in a freshly showered Harry Connick Jr. And he remains wet for the rest of the film.
Yep. Every time he shows up, he casually robs Ashley Judd.
Yeah. He's such a scumbag. He's perfect.
Yeah. He keeps trying to bully Michael Shannon, but he can't. Like, I think his name is Peter Evans.
His name's Peter Evans, yeah.
And he says his last name weird, like with a lisp, and it's like, nope, didn't get it that time, Harry Connick. Maybe next time. And then he's like, what does he call him?
Peter Piper.
Peter Piper, and you're like, you got it.
At him.
You got your bully name. Like, he has to try a few times. Like, he sucks.
He's never successfully bullies him. It's very funny. Like, he does the shoulder bump, and then when he comes back later on, when Peter's like staring through the microscope and he's trying to fuck with him, it's just like not he can't bully him, and it's very funny.
Yeah, because you're waiting for Michael Shannon to just murder
to
Harry
kill
Connick
him.
Jr.
Yeah, you think that's the direction it's going,
right? Because Harry Connick Jr. is, I before I keep talking about him, I have to establish he is awful. He's a bully.
He's the most killable man. Like
he's a loser. He's not funny. He's like annoying, and he beats up Ashley Judd because he's a coward, little annoying shithead. I'm saying all that because the movie does a thing where when he starts showing up again, you're like, you got to get involved, Harry Connick.
Right,
Jr.
you're like praying for him to come back because he's the most sane character.
Yes,
that on screen at the moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, not counting
she drives
Lynn
away her
Collins.
friend.
Yeah, she drives her friend really in a terrifying scene.
They do a great job with her because they do a subplot where she is going to be have custody of a kid. Mm-hmm. And so she's trying to help Ashley Judd, but it hits this point where it's clear that she's like, I have to protect my life. That's like she doesn't say it, but you realize she has shit going on, and so she bounces from the movie essentially.
Yep.
And you don't go like, where the fuck did she go? You kind of, if you've paid attention, you're like, yeah, I would too.
Well,
like she has
in that scene where she drives her off, it's kind of like I wouldn't come back either. Like I'd call somebody. Like I'd call the police probably, or I wouldn't call the police. I'd call like 911 and be like, these people. There's some people in this hotel room that need some help. Like
right, and you sort of get I got the idea that maybe that's what happened. Although at the end I was like, we're just kicking the door, cops. But of course they said the Dr. Sweet comes in, and again there's this question of like how much of that was real. I don't know. Right. Because he acts so weird.
Yeah, in many ways, he's the strangest character in the movie. That's 100% deliberate. It has to be.
And it's like, is he a bad doctor? Is he trying a tactic, a negotiating tactic? Or is he like in on something and actually
is he part of some conspiracy? Or is this a partial or total delusion? Like, is he even really there, or is he there but not really doing all of it? Because he sits down and smokes crack at one point.
Right. He the first thing he fucking does is he's like, may I? And smoke some crack. And his name is Dr. Sweet. And he says like, I know what happened to your son.
And he talks like fucking Agent Smith. So they do everything they can to make him odd. Like odder even than Michael Shannon, because we're like used to Michael Shannon at this point.
Yeah. they're doing this thing.
Although
where,
can such a thing ever be true? Can you really ever be at ease when he's in the room?
I think you can be in a moment, but in his Michael Shannon's long game is always terrifying. So, like, we at no point do we accept that there are bugs, right? The bugs are not there.
It becomes
it's just what causes the delusion.
Right. It's pretty clear pretty quickly that the bugs are not there. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Harry Connick Jr. is basically like, I'll be back in 2 weeks. He slaps her down. She is so casual about being beaten by this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when he starts saying things about like chemicals and terrorism.
Well, that's when he
sees
sees his moment.
Yeah, you're right.
I think,
he sees his moment.
Yeah, he sees his moment because he is also an abusive guy. It's not just the fact that he's crazy.
Right.
He sees sees her vulnerable, so he's like, okay, now I can. And that's when he really unloads his bullshit on her.
Right.
And it's just it's so much, and she's at such a low point. Because before he starts unloading his bullshit on her, he drags the story of her son out of her.
Yes. So her son was taken at the supermarket, and it was like 8 years ago. Mm-hmm. So like, as far as she's concerned, her son is dead, right?
Yeah.
Like he's gone, and she's like always blaming herself. So that's her trauma.
Yeah. And he targets that.
Yeah. And that's when I think I think it's that moment where the helicopter sounds. He basically says like, I've got people after me. And he at first is going to leave. And she's like, please don't leave.
That's after they have sex.
Okay. Yeah. They do have sex.
Yeah. But see, what happens is Harry Connick like smacks her down and leaves, right. And he goes and helps her up and gets her rag and starts talking to her and starts asking her questions and asks if she has any kids, and she says no. And then like 1 or 2 questions later, he goes back. It's like, well, you say you trust me, but if you trust me, then why'd you lie to me? She says, what do you mean? She's like, well, you said you didn't have kids. She says, well, how did you know? He says, well, I told you. I pick up on things. So she starts telling him the story and gets really choked up. She's like, well, if you want to ask any questions, ask me now, because I never want to talk about this again. And the way he asks her about it is he does it in a way specifically to dredge up that exact feeling of guilt, because what he says is, when did you stop looking for him? You're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
so good.
It's so manipulative. And then after that, or it's either right after that or right before that. It's around this time where he starts. I think it's before this where he starts spouting out the stuff like how he's like, well, you're right to be scared because you're never safe. People are watching you all the time, and even worse than watching you, they're manipulating you to do things that you normally wouldn't do or normally wouldn't accept. So like he kind of like foreshadows it right before he does it. So he manipulates her, and then he starts unloading his bullshit on her. And then
he's getting her in the cult.
And then he does after they have sex, they're laying in bed, and then that's when the bugs appear. So he's really in the delusion now.
It's cute at first where he's just like, you don't see that? It's an aphid. And he's not like,
right, and they have this kind of like cute
God,
conversation about insects. Yeah.
Yeah. He's just like, shit, we got a little bug thing.
Yeah, they even do some little like Marx Brothers wordplay with insects for a bit. Like it's like they really are, even though they've had those spikes of like bone chilling glimpses right there in the previous scene. They're still kind of treating it like a rom-com almost.
Right, because it's such a slow burn until this halfway point. Because what happens is they have a fight. He basically is like, I'm going to leave. Because I think it's the idea is he says, like, I'm putting you in danger.
Yeah.
Like, I'm AWOL is what he finally gets out of her. Or she gets out of him. Mm-hmm. And he's like, the government is looking for me. I can't get you involved. She insists for him to stay. And that's when you're hearing these helicopter sounds slowly. But they did this thing they established where they're, like, lying awake and they're looking at the ceiling fan. So like we've established like, oh, it's the ceiling fan, but it starts kind of sounding like a helicopter.
They've been mixing that sound effect in from the beginning too.
Yeah. And basically what happens is she picks a bug off of him and then the helicopter starts roaring in, and they all freak out. Like it's like a helicopter's over them, and then it just cuts.
Though the set like physically shakes.
Yes.
Like it like breaks the fourth wall.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. It's really cool.
It's really cool, and we know it's a delusion. Well, we know it's a delusion now, but later they show it happen again. And then when they show Harry Connick Jr. outside, it's clearly not happening. So you know it's not real. Like it's definitive by the end of the movie. But we cut back, and then they're just fully in fucking bug mode. They're putting up, like those fly traps, the sticky tape. Mm-hmm. They're doing all this shit. And it's still like it's normal enough in that it looks like someone who's really having a bug problem. They're at their wit's end. So we get Harry Connick Jr. Again, and he's like surprisingly reasonable. And I think it's because he knows that Michael Shannon will like bite his face off. Like he's been to prison. I think he gets vibes where he's like, this guy.
He tests him a little.
Right.
Yeah, he tests him a little bit more because he's like, we used to get it. We had a guy. You remind me of a guy in the pen. We used to call him Mrs. Rothstein. Like he's still trying to get like a rise, and still it's just nothing.
Right, and Michael Shannon's just like looking at his microscope at this point at the bugs that he thinks are in his blood.
And his blood. He's pricking his own finger at this point and putting it on slides, and then burning it, and then look. He has this whole ritual he's doing. Yeah, it's really unnerving.
And
it's happened so suddenly where it was like kind of still being like this kind of weirdly sweet offbeat comedy, and then it just gets really crazy all of a sudden.
It gets really
just really upsetting. We're like, oh no.
Yeah. And I feel like Harry Connick is just like he probably knows like the drugs, the stuff. He's probably met people like this, so he doesn't seem too fazed by it.
No,
but he basically gets the fuck out of there.
He leaves.
He leaves.
Michael Shannon doesn't do anything but behave the way he's behaving.
Yeah, and Harry Connick Jr. is like
chases him off.
He basically is just like, all right, I've lost. I'm leaving. He still steals some money. Michael Shannon just, and then in comes Ashley Judd with her friend, and her friend is like genuinely concerned, giving them the benefit of the doubt. And that's when we get the reveal where he's like, they're giving us sores all over my body. And he lifts up his shirt, and he's just covered in these bloody sores that are clearly scratch marks. Like it's clear that it's self-inflicted, or
right.
At least
he's been cutting bugs out of his skin.
Yeah. And so it's like this ghastly reveal, and they never show that happening. They just show
it once with Ashley Judd in this scene after Connick leaves. She starts freaking out about a bug at her elbow, and she cuts it out with a paper clip or a safety pin in front of her friend. And then her friend is like, so then we learn that this has been going on for a little while, and that her friend has had suspicions because we learned that they were coming back from the doctor to look at the sores on Ashley Judd's body, and then she keeps shouting, like her friend keeps shouting, tell him what the doctor told you. And they eventually reveal that the doctor told her that they were self-inflicted and they were not bug bites. That he said they were not bug bites and that they appeared to be self-inflicted.
Yeah. And she has this moment, which is like, are you going to go with your friend or not? And she ends up rejecting it. She screams, you're trying to take the one thing in the world I have.
After he has a terrifying fit. Like it's like, this is like,
again,
it's when he goes fully mask off.
Yeah, it's very, you could argue it's manipulative if he knows what he's doing, because it's this moment where her friend is like, this guy's delusional, you have to get the fuck out of here. So he throws a fucking fit, and then he starts like seizing and falling, and you could argue he's doing it because of what the friend's trying to do, right?
He's also clawing at his face and his mouth.
And he's like, they're everywhere. And it's an emotional fit as much as a physical one.
Yeah.
And so that's when, she's like, get out. You're trying to take away the one thing in the world that I have. And it's like, God damn, like...
Yeah, this guy she's known for 2 weeks.
And she's not wrong. It is like the one thing she fucking has right now. Because that's the whole thing. Is she starts in such a fucking dismal place.
She
you
has
know?
a line, which I think is in the scene immediately following this, where they're talking, and she says, "I like talking with you about bugs. I prefer talking with you about bugs than talking to nobody about nothing."
Yeah. Yeah, it's all she has.
Yeah.
This bug thing. It's a bit, again, like how a conspiracy grows, right? People in these like traumatic situations trying to give the trauma meaning. Like conspiracy theories, almost all of them are about giving the world order in chaos.
Right, exactly.
And we get to this soon, but not quite yet. This is when we get to Tinfoil Town, right? Around here.
Right around
I think
here, yeah.
he tells her that the government put something in his tooth. He's been picking at his tooth. His tooth has been hurting.
An egg sac.
And it's an egg sac. And he tears out the tooth, and she's kind
man.
of, and this is like hitting the third act, and she's kind of still has this one little grasp on reality at this point. Like, don't do that. He rips it out. He puts it under the microscope. She looks at it and looks at him and goes, millions.
Yep.
She finally
That's it.
sees the bugs.
Yep.
And that's when it's like, okay, she's
the
done.
point of no return for Ashley Judd.
Yeah. And it's this traumatic moment, him tearing out his tooth.
It's I mean it's William Friedkin is director of The Exorcist, so it's this frightening sequence.
Yeah, he's screaming.
He's just
it's body
this-
horror.
And it's also psychological horror because we're just watching madness.
Yeah.
And it's really unsettling in a very
It really is.
Yeah, like a really just
movie-
unnerving.
If you can't tell, this movie is very unsettling, very depressing at times. The one thing that makes it entertaining for me, and this might not work for everybody, is I'm very familiar with Ashley Judd, Harry Connick Jr., and Michael Shannon. So I'm watching going, oh, they're having such a great time.
Oh yeah,
Like they're having a fucking
yeah.
blast.
This movie is an actor's dream to be in.
but of course the story itself is tragic.
It's bleak. It's real bleak.
It's one of those that for me it's like it's so bleak that I'm watching and I just kind of giggle of like Jesus Christ.
Well, and the movie it is deliberately pretty funny in several parts.
Oh yeah.
Like the sort of the climax when it's just them spinning each other up with this just completely insane web of an impossible conspiracy. That's the climax, and it's like it's terrifying because it is, again, and you're just like, man, you're just watching madness, and it's like really an uncomfortable feeling, but it's also really funny in several parts.
Yeah, they're chewing the scenery.
Yeah.
And again, it's also very like, especially ahead of its time now, it really wraps up. Like I've been thinking for a while, I was thinking about a script idea about how conspiracies happen and this need to order the chaos.
Yeah.
And after watching this film again, I'm like, man, maybe I won't write that. This movie nailed it. Because it's just like so perfect and simple way of showing that.
Mm-hmm.
Because now we get Tinfoil Town where they
every surface
they
of the
get the
hotel
pizza.
room is covered in tinfoil.
Yeah. And they get a pizza at the door and they don't remember if it's a fucking something they ordered. They think it's the government that's trying to get them, and they like grab the pizza because they're like they'll know if we don't get the pizza. It's very like Scanner Darkly, where they're like really overly paranoid, in a silly way, and they're like digging through the pizza and putting it under the microscope.
Right,
like
the apes at the beginning of 2001. They're just that's how they're treating. They're just slapping it into the microscope. But I really want to just the cut to this scene, just the image of the apartment that is now totally covered in tinfoil.
Right,
that is such a great reveal.
Yes.
Just to go abruptly into that, it communicates so much about how much has progressed and how bad this has gotten.
And it's the ultimate tinfoil hat. Like we all know tinfoil hat.
Yeah.
And so it was a great symbolism of like, they coated the whole fucking room in tinfoil. And you can imagine that as a stage play. The lights go out, we get a set dressing moment, and then lights come on, and you're like, "Oh fuck!"
I'm sure there were I'm sure there were gasps, gasps, laughs. Like it's such a a powerful image, and it communicates so much immediately.
Yep.
It's so good.
And Ashley Judd, she like creeps out when the pizza thing happens.
Yeah.
And then we get, I believe, Dr. Sweet. And we get the sense that, or maybe Harry Connick knocks on the door at some
It's
point.
Dr. Sweet first, and then he's like, "Well,
Yeah.
can I? I've heard Peter is here. Can I speak to him?" And then nobody is answering. So finally, he's like, "All right, well, perhaps maybe I could talk to you." And then Harry Connick kicks in the door with like a flashlight with Dr. Sweet. It gets really surreal because that's like, is he really there with Dr. Sweet?
And he's basically like, you're gonna talk to this guy.
Yeah.
And he leaves. And so like, but at the same time, you're like, yeah, I mean, Harry Connick Jr., again, the biggest piece of shit in the world, but she has been brought down in this such a dark place that you're like, save her.
You're
like
grasping
somebody
for any thread of sanity at this point. Yeah.
Exactly. Which is, again, an incredible thing for this movie to be able to pull off.
Yeah.
And Dr. Sweet is a fucking weirdo. He smokes her crack.
Yeah, he's like a ghost. It's so weird.
He says he'll talk to the government. He says he pretends to see the bug.
He tries a couple of different approaches. So it's one way that this scene is done so well. It's because they give you the enough threads for, well, he could maybe really be here. Maybe he really is a doctor that's just trying to get Peter back to the hospital. Right. Or maybe he really is part of the conspiracy. But like, because you see him work through a couple of different approaches where first he's like, I'm Dr. Sweet, I'm his doctor. Like he tries to just explain to her flat out what is wrong with him. And she's not buying it. And he sees the crack pipe and he's like, well, can I try that? And he sits down, starts smoking it. And then he starts like with a different approach of like, yeah, you're right. Peter is... he did get out of the army hospital and there is something wrong. We need to get him back in there. And then she's not buying it. So then he tries like another approach of where he's like, actually, I do know they're watching you right now and I can call them off. So you see him like try and fail like a couple of negotiation tactics.
Yeah. And you could argue what he represents is like going back to how cults, conspiracies happen. It's people who aren't just in these desperate, traumatic situations, but they don't get the help they need. Mm-hmm. They get cynical help. They get, governments, they aren't taken care of financially. They don't have health insurance. No one is creating programs. And the people, the few help they do get are people who are cynical and treat them badly and who don't get enough resources themselves. So you could argue that's what he represents, right? It's like the uncaring world. The lifeline she gets is still like insidious and weird
and self-serving.
Yeah. And so like whether or not he's a delusion or not, that's clearly like kind of what it feels like he represents.
We never trust him. Like the audience never trusts him.
No, you're like, yeah, I don't know what his deal is.
Which seems to indicate that we're probably still, I mean, obviously we're still seeing this through Ashley Judd's perspective, I think.
Right. Yeah, I think so. Because then Michael Shannon comes out, and what they do again, we're like, we don't trust this guy. But then what Michael Shannon throws at us, we're like, well, it's definitely not that. Which is that he is a robot. He starts snapping his fingers in front of him, and he's like, you're the new model, aren't you?
Dude, when he opens that, if I was Dr. Sweet, who or whatever he is,
I would run.
Michael Shannon opened that door and appeared in the doorway looking the way that he does. He is
covered in blood in his underwear, I believe.
Covered in blood in underwear or sweatpants. I think it might be pants. He appears to have cut his eye out at this point. He's just holding the biggest knife in the world.
Yeah.
And he's pointing it at you and screaming, you're a robot.
And he's basically like...
There'd have been a Roadrunner dust cloud where I was.
Oh, yeah. And then he's just like, I'll cut him open. And then he does exactly that.
He does. He stabs him about 8,000 times. Yeah. Screaming, machine! Machine!
Which is the most Michael Shannon thing.
What a haunting way to die.
Oh, yeah.
Hearing Michael Shannon scream, machine!
As he stabs you.
As he's stabbing you just into dust.
Yep. And then... no machinery inside, but he was like, no, it's fake. It's fake. It's
artificial.
It's artificial. And he's like licking the blood, and it's like, just complete deep end.
Yeah,
here.
it's
and this
Tropic
is when
Thunder.
yeah, it's Tropic Thunder, and this is when like she has accepted all of this, but he's going to bring it home, and this is where he talks her through her trauma to involve the entire conspiracy. He adds Jim Jones into it. He tells her that there is a big conspiracy in the world. He talks about like specific government meetings to do microchips and bugs to maintain the status quo, which of course is really funny because that is what the government is. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing about conspiracy theories, right? Is people are like, it's all to maintain the status quo. And it's like, no, you're right. They don't have to do microchips and lizard people to do that. Like,
No, they figured it out already.
right. Like, that's the whole thing about conspiracy theories is like, they're always right on the cusp of what the real thing is, which is like, yeah, the government is this big overreaching system that's trying to, maintain order. They're not doing it for necessarily insidious reasons. I mean, I'm sure some people in the government are, but it's mostly like greed and to maintain their jobs, right? Like the deep state is just people in the military trying to maintain, like that Pentagon Wars movie we watched.
Yeah,
that's what the deep state
trying to make a lot of money.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Yeah, for the most part. Again, like this is the whole thing.
There are several maniacs in the government right now.
And we have done shit to our citizens
Oh, yeah.
that were conspiracy theories.
Yes.
And that's how it all, yeah. But
he mentions them in the movie, MK Ultra, Tuskegee.
exactly. And so that's how it all gets wrapped into this because it's the combination of being the government failing us, people being in these situations of need, and then turning to things that are completely out of this world, too far gone. And
Right,
so
that's where she
basically
begins. She begins alone and isolated. I mean, literally, I think the first image is that establishing overhead shot of the motel in the middle of nowhere in the desert.
And it's a very creepy shot because it's almost like from the point of view of a bug flying. Like that's the idea. It's like a kind of it's a helicopter shot.
Helicopter,
It's silent. And so it feels eerie, and it is to point out the isolation.
So it's already somebody who's been abandoned by everyone, by society, she has a very, very fragile support system who, as you pointed out, is about to kind of have to make a difficult decision and leave her behind so that she can get her own life together.
Yeah, exactly. And he walks her through like, no, they wanted us to meet each other because that was always destiny. It was all part of the conspiracy, and that means they took your son.
Yeah, and he digs up her trauma to tie it to his own delusion. And he talks her through this giant conspiracy that explains why her son, why these tragedies in her life happened, and she gets like a moment of bliss almost. Realizing it all makes sense. There is order to the world. It's not chaos. Right. This was all something that was done to me by some powerful force, but I am actually the main character, and I do come out on top. Like at one point, she stands up and says, "I am the Bug Queen."
She sure does, and she says it knowing like it's kind of funny in the moment. Like she
but
knows
also
that
like
she's
euphoric.
being silly,
also euphoric.
but it's euphoric. Yeah,
she's
because
laughing, but she is also experiencing genuine joy.
Yeah, she's decided that the government put bugs in her, so when they had bug eggs or two different types of bugs, they have sex, and they are creating a new bug race that's in the apartment that they want to get out into the world. And so that's the conspiracy, right? Her son was taken away. All these things were put in motion so these two people would have sex so that they would meet each other in this hotel room. And so life isn't random and cruel anymore. It's, like you said, she's important. She figured it out, and she's going to beat them, and it's okay. Everything's okay. And so how do you beat them? You burn down everything, right?
You douse yourselves in gasoline and light yourselves on fire.
Naked. Yep, and they sure do.
And there's something... I mean, they kneel down in front of each other and they say a couple of really alarmingly nonsense things to each other.
Perry Connick is banging on the door at this moment.
Yeah, then she shoots him with a nail gun and doesn't kill him, but gets him to back off. He says right before they right as they're about to do it, he says, "I am the drone." I am the drone, and he dumps the gasoline all over himself, and then he is going to pour it on her, and she says, I think he says, "You're the queen," right? Or does she say, "I am the queen"?
Yeah, something like that.
I think he says, "You are the queen," and then she repeats it, and he dumps the gasoline on her.
Right.
And then he says, "I love you," and she says, "I love you." And then he strikes the match, and she gasps, and then it cuts to the final shot, which is the entire motel room engulfed, just roaring. But there's something about what he says in the last couple of moments.
And her gasp is like,
and her gasp
at the last minute, it feels like she's like
she
one moment
it.
of like,
yep.
"Oh no, this is bad."
We're covered in gasoline. He just struck a match.
Yeah,
And it's like she just realized, oh, this isn't my idea.
it's a death cult.
And that's what he's doing. He's making her think it's her idea.
Yes,
Because he's saying, "I'm the drone. You're the queen.
right. You're in charge.
You're in charge."
Yeah.
And he walks her through that and kind of eggs her on until it seems like she comes to the conclusion that they need to destroy themselves to destroy the bugs to keep them from being used against them, to keep them from being taken by the government and turned into weapons because they're really good, gentle bugs.
Right.
He leads her to that.
Right, they're their bugs. Is it
Yeah.
basically the conclusion at the end?
And he's picking at her guilt and shame and sorrow and trauma over being a mother specifically. Like
Yes.
She's
the mother to these bugs. Yeah, absolutely.
So it's another like is he the delusional one, or obviously he is. I don't know, but there's like a question there for me a little bit. Like, is he just playing into her delusion? Because the movie does start from her perspective and seems to stick with her perspective.
I think they're yes-anding each other to an extent. That's
yeah.
why this is a bit of ahead of its time, because you look at, and I hate to bring him up, someone like Trump.
Right. I just wanted to say real quick, what makes me think is because all these dots I'm sort of connecting with his behavior, where it seems like there's a lot of intent specifically to gaslight her with his delusions.
Oh yeah.
So it's like hard to tell how much of what he's doing is his delusion and how much of it is intent.
Well, all right, bringing up Trump. Trump clearly is not doing himself any favors, right? Especially not now. There's still question, depending on your level of cynicism of the world, of whether or not he's going to come out of this okay.
Right.
Out of all the bullshit he did, an actual con artist doesn't get caught, right? So there's an element, a question of, does Trump believe his own bullshit? Like, does he convince himself? At a certain point, does he think he didn't win he won the election fair and square, right? Like, does he think this stuff, because he can't shut his mouth. He does it to the point that he hurts himself. And I think that's kind of the question around Michael Shannon, right? He's a manipulative guy, but he's also clearly has a mental issues.
There is something, there's an issue there.
And so, like, it's Jim Jones shit. Like, cult leaders kill themselves with everybody else, right?
Yeah.
They prey on others, but then they also destroy themselves. So that is an element of this, is he is preying on her for sure, but at a certain point, it's not like he's going to rob her and leave. He's ride or die as well.
And so this is what he wanted all along.
Yeah, it's what happens when there's a delusional person who is also very manipulative. You get a cult leader, I imagine. Like, I'm not an expert, but
Yeah.
and that's kind of what the movie's trying to do. Is this microcosm, this little sample of like how a cult happens, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's this, but then you multiply it by 100 people. And so, like, that's what makes it fascinating, because it's like doing cult stuff and conspiracy theories all at once. And again, he mentions Jim Jones as being like, they weren't a cult, they were killed
Right.
by the
Jim
government.
Jones was the good guy, and they were
And
assassinated.
That's a real point of no return. When
man. I mean,
when someone says that.
He's already murdered a guy at that point.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
So,
Yeah, folks, though, if someone at a bar tells you Jim Jones was murdered, you got to get away.
get away from that
person.
Get right away from that. Definitely don't bring them back to your motel room.
Yeah. But he
Man.
wasn't an axe murderer. He didn't murder anyone with an axe.
That's true. He was not an axe murderer.
He was right about that. And Michael Shannon's perfect for this role, right?
Oh yeah,
Like,
yes, yeah. This is top shelf Michael Shannon. He's incredible in this movie.
Did we say whether we liked this film?
Oh, I don't know. This is a pretty good movie. This is an excellent film, actually.
Yeah, it's really good when you realize like this is a body horror film. This is a horror film, and there's nothing paranormal about it, and it's a horrifying idea. And it's, I think, a really big accomplishment in terms of writing. And acting. They should all be very proud. I don't think it did very well, and I think people at the time were a little turned off from it because it wasn't what they expected.
Right, the marketing was really strange for this.
Right,
like we said,
you're going in for like The Exorcist, and you got Requiem for a Dream, and so I get it. Where it's like, man, I'm just sad.
Yeah,
now.
I just feel bummed.
Yeah,
like it was written by Tracy Letts.
Who is that?
Well, he also wrote Killer Joe, which was another play that William Friedkin turned into a movie later.
Oh, shit.
And he's an actor, too, and he is in The Husky Handjob, Deep Water. He is the guy that has the fatal car accident.
Excellent.
Remember
good
the
on
chase
him.
scene, the bicycle chase scene?
I gotta rewatch that movie. All I remember
Ben
is...
Affleck, Himbo Slayer, is trying to chase Tracy Letts down.
Oh, yeah, I do remember.
And like he drives his car into a ravine.
Man, that movie escalated so quickly for Ben Affleck.
What an incredible film.
A series of fucking just amazing misfortunes.
Yeah.
Oh, I gotta rewatch that movie. What a good movie. Husky
Real
Hand
thrilling
Job.
piece of cinema.
Yeah, they cut out the Husky Hand Job.
Biggest cowards.
Tragedy. But yeah, man, goddamn. Remember the rope swing? It was so calm and nice.
Man, it was like sweet. Like it was weirdly sweet for a while.
This is a movie, I think, that if you watched this and was disappointed, this is a good rewatch.
Give it another shot. Yeah.
Yeah, especially when you mentally are prepared. Because I knew going into this, I was like, this is going to be a fucking trip, you know?
Yeah, it's going to be a real William Friedkin movie.
Yeah, it's real bummer again. There's a lot of, trigger warnings for domestic abuse and psychological abuse.
Abuse, yeah.
And mental illness as well. Like, it's touching on a lot of upsetting subjects.
It's a disturbing movie. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's not particularly, like, sensitive about it either. It's not... It's about like the worst case scenario in a spiral.
Yeah.
And so like you're not going to come out of this feeling happy for the characters, or the landlord of the motel, the slumlord.
Oh.
I mean, they are a slumlord, so you're going to get a fire or two. But
it's probably not the first fire that year.
No, not the first tinfoil covered fire.
No. Not the first person Michael Shannon has stabbed to death.
Yeah. Michael Shannon just busts out the back. Motel owner's like, Michael Shannon, you done it again.
They're on to
Runs
me.
off. Flies off with bug wings. That's the movie I
Jumps
want.
on the back of a giant bug.
Oh, just like a fucking,
Get me out of here.
Like dresses like Zod.
Yeah. Take off, Waspy.
Fun movie.
Yeah.
Fun stuff.
It's a delightful movie.
I don't know what else to say about it.
No, it's real good.
Really good.
A lot of obviously very strong directing choices.
Yeah.
The writing is really good. But really, man, the acting. So everyone is incredible in this movie.
Firing on all cylinders.
Yeah,
It is.
it's mostly a two-hander between Ashley Judd and Michael Shannon, and they're so fucking good.
Yeah, it's for a movie that takes place mostly in a hotel room with a couple of people. It is not boring.
No,
Not
it's never
boring.
boring.
No, it's fascinating, and
Yeah,
like they
very
should
good
all
movie.
they should be very proud. Like it's also apparently Michael Shannon was in the play. He played the same character.
That's interesting. Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's one of those ones because everybody loves Michael Shannon. It's one of his best roles, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's so good. He's amazing. Everybody is. It's one of Ashley Judd's best roles. Like she doesn't get to play stuff like this. It feels like she usually gets to like fight crime, solve murders, get revenge.
Teams up with Morgan Freeman a lot.
Morgan Freeman shit. Like not, she's done plenty of fun
Solve
stuff.
a lot of mysteries, yeah.
But like this is like, her going all fucking out. It's just 3 actors mainly for just like doing a great fucking job.
Yeah.
Yeah. So check it out. Just be prepared.
Yeah.
And thank you to Burrito.
Yes,
Burrito,
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much that we could revisit Bug.
Yeah, it had been far too long.
It really had been. I'm so glad I watched it again. Mm-hmm. This was through our Patreon.
Sure was.
Patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. GAMEFULOY unemployed. You go on there, you give us just $5 of your dollars a month. You get access to a bunch of exclusive podcasts. Tom and Jeff watch Batman. Fox Mulder is a maniac. Lord knows Mulder would have been right there pouring that gasoline on his body.
Man.
He's done it before.
They'd have had to tie him down. Like Michael Shannon and Ashley Judd would have been like, this motherfucker's crazy. We gotta tie him down.
Mulder's like, I'm the Bug King.
I'm the Bug King.
We also do Spiel Boys and Star Trek Next Futurama with the Small Beans folks. And we watch movies every Friday night with our patrons.
Oh, man,
bunch of stuff on there, bunch of tiers. Great community. Check it out.
Yeah. We also have a store. Head over to gamefullyunemployed.com where you can find a link to our Teespring store where we have all kinds of cool original artwork and designs you get on t-shirts, mugs, stickers, posters, all sorts of things. So slap your little bug picking peepers onto that.
Yeah. Or your bug peepers. If you are a bug listening to this. If you are
the bug queen or king or drone,
yep,
slap your bug peepers onto it.
Bugs find this movie offensive. They're watching like, hey, we're not so bad.
Probably.
Yeah.
It's like Jaws for bugs.
It is. Yeah. Bug. It should have been Bugs. There was more than one bug. Why wasn't it Bugs? What? That makes sense.
It's just stabbing Bugs Bunny to death. Machine! Machine! Machine!
Lights the match. What's up, Doc?
Let's burn this fucking rabbit. Why wasn't Michael Shannon in Space Jam 2?
Oh my God. As Elmer Fudd.
Just fucking dunking a basketball.
He can do it. Right?